And again, if we'll let her finish her presentation, we'll take questions after that. So,
okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. As you said, my name is Shannon Manigault. I'm the city's Inspector General. I'm joined today by Deputy Inspector General Shelby Williams of the Compliance Division. Deputy Inspector General Brad Garvey unfortunately couldn't join us here. He runs our Independent Procurement Review Division, but he is under the weather. Thank you, of course, for this opportunity to discuss the work of the office. The mission of the City of Atlanta Office of the Inspector General is to build public trust by engaging in prevention, investigation and review, and enforcement to eliminate fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption. In carrying out this mission, through our oversight and through our collaboration with city stakeholders, we hope to make the City of Atlanta a national standard for good governance. The third slide shows the anticipated organizational structure of the office for fiscal year 24. The chart shows the same headcount as fiscal year 23, but it reflects a slight restructuring of the Compliance Division and some title shifts, which we will discuss further on slide 7. With slide 4, we begin with the work of the Independent Procurement Review Division. Under the charter, the IPRO team must review all city solicitations that will come before council with an aggregate value of $1 million or more. When conducting IPRO reviews, we seek to identify any gaps in the procurement file and other areas of deficiencies. We track compliance with procedures and document known risks. To date this fiscal year, IPRO has issued 33 reports on solicitations for procurements with a total value of $628 million. Those reports included 118 findings. The findings in IPRO reports cover a spectrum of observed deficiencies and fraud risks. These range from instances such as where integrity documentation doesn't include a project name, which of course then begs the question, to what are evaluators or vendors promising to abstain from or adhere to instances where user agencies have not selected the lowest bidder and have not provided an explanation as to why that's the case. When the IPRO team identifies conduct that merits further investigation, it refers these matters to the Compliance Division and/or the city's Ethics Office, and we reference these referrals in our reports. In fiscal year 22 and in fiscal year 23, IPRO received funding to grow the division. The team, which originally included only 2 independent procurement review officers, now has 4 IPROs performing the work of the reviews. That has enabled us to keep pace with the increased number of solicitations arising from city projects. IPRO has had a long-standing weekly meeting with the Department of Procurement that has allowed the team to raise issues concerning solicitation reviews with the Chief Procurement Officer and the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer. Historically, these meetings have focused on individual solicitations where IPROs have had difficulty obtaining documents. In fiscal year 22, working in partnership with DOP, we began using these meetings to discuss every matter that was subject to IPRO review, to make sure that the independent procurement review officers were provided not only access to documents, but real-time updates on the progress of the solicitation to make sure that the IPRO review proceeded concurrently with the DOP process. This fiscal year, that meeting was expanded to include every individual DOP professional responsible for each solicitation. With this expansion, IPROs can hear updates directly from the procurement specialists, so that not only can the review proceed in lockstep, but IPRO would also receive notice of when items would be presented to council. This communication is crucial. It helps IPRO prioritize its work so we can generate reports that are needed for council consideration. No one wants an item to be, quote, held for IPRO less than the independent procurement review team. That has always been the case, and we've worked strategically to minimize the likelihood that it occurs. But as many controls as we put in place, the system only works as well as the information that we receive. When there are breakdowns, for instance, when IPRO does not receive the documents that it needs, when IPRO has provided a draft report but Department of Procurement or the user agency has not yet provided a response to findings, when iPro learns about a project for the very first time 2 working days before it's set to be provided to council, under all of these circumstances, iPro is not responsible for those items not moving forward. Now, I flag these things today because a question recently arose during a committee meeting after an item was taken off of held of whether iPro had sufficient resources to keep pace on its reviews. And the answer to that question is yes, we do. And to be clear, we've not always been able to say that. But with the doubling of the review staff, thanks to support from this council, we have the capacity to fully keep up with reviews, and we do that. The term held for iPro suggests that inactivity by iPro has slowed the process, and that is simply not the case. We did an informal review in-house and compiled a list of 11 matters in the last 3 months alone that highlight last-minute timing, communication, access to documentation issues that were entirely outside of our control, but where the reported takeaway was that the matter was held for iPro. So as we'll discuss on slide 9, we hope that collaboration and education efforts with all stakeholders in the procurement process will increase transparency surrounding the iPro process and, through increased and improved communication, will help lessen the frequency of held items in connection with the solicitations that require iPro reports. Turning to compliance, fiscal year 23 is the first full fiscal year where the division has been staffed and fielding investigations. This fiscal year, the division initiated 28 investigations, most of which are ongoing, and closed 12 investigations. These investigations have ranged in topic from, for example, substantiated allegation regarding a city employee working simultaneously full-time for the city and Fulton County, to an unsubstantiated allegation of abuse of authority concerning an elected official. In connection with our investigations, we've also issued 8 policy and procedure recommendations on topics including 1, assessing, reporting, and correcting potential leave issues arising from the city's misclassification of codes for Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, or FFCRA leave. 2, addressing a conflict of law concerning the residency requirements that are set forth in the city charter. And 3, creating a system to standardize and reduce corruption vulnerabilities regarding the city-issued vendor references. We have plans to post on our website our policy and procedure recommendations and whether city departments have accepted or declined those recommendations, and where they have accepted them, to be able to track the department's progress towards implementation. One of the most significant developments this fiscal year has been the engagement of a marketing firm to increase public awareness of the office. The firm, Jacob's Eye, started in November, and we've been working closely with the professionals there to build the campaign, which we hope to launch early next month. We're excited to be positioned to reach members of the public to inform them of the office. And there are 2 important intended benefits of the campaign. First, we want people to know where and how to report these incidents of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption in City of Atlanta government. But second, we hope that the knowledge of the office, the mere existence of the unit where there are individuals dedicated to looking into issues where we can identify and prevent corruption, that the knowledge here will help build public trust in city government. And of course, we're still new, so we've continued this fiscal year to engage in office building. At the beginning of the fiscal year, we moved into our permanent physical space at 185 Ted Turner. We've continued to introduce the compliance function to city stakeholders, and we continue to secure the resources the office needs in order to best serve the city. And these range from resources as large as obtaining vehicles to as equally large but intangible, gaining access to critical databases. Slide 6 reflects the budget for the office, and there are just a couple of things to flag here. First, this reflects the combined budgets of the compliance and independent procurement review divisions. The compliance division is split funded with 70% general fund, 15% water, wastewater, and 15% aviation. And the Independent Procurement Review Division is split funded 25% general fund, 25% water, wastewater, and 50% aviation. The second thing to note is that while it appears on this slide that the budget has shrunk for the office, it hasn't. There have been 2 additional positions that were added from fiscal year 23, and there are a number of equity adjustments that are proposed for fiscal year 24. And so both fiscal year 23 and 24 should actually reflect higher values from the enterprise funds. I understand from conversations with finance that a floor amendment is planned to address that for fiscal year 24. The fiscal year 24 headcount reflects the current headcount, which is 16 total employees, with 11 under compliance and 5 with iPro. Slide 7 shows the variance from this fiscal year to next. As we noticed, the change is essentially flat, because even with those enterprise adjustments, the enterprise funds adjustments that I talked about, they mostly remain consistent from fiscal year 23 to 24. The budget remains static because increases in personnel funding are largely offset by our decreases in operating expenses. The personnel shifts consist of promotions needed to reflect and expand upon existing roles and responsibilities, and the equity adjustments to grade levels on the compliance side will bring parity both within the office and across like functions in the city. On the operations side, we were able to decrease our operating expenses. First, because the public awareness campaign, for which funds have been set aside for the last 2 fiscal years, is now underway, so that less than half of the contract will be performed in fiscal year 24. But also, because the office is still new, we're reaching a point where we're now better able to gauge the funding needs, both from discrete projects and also by identifying those recurring needs. This year, that's resulted in decrease in the operating budget. Slide 8 reflects some of that right sizing of the operations budget. Personnel costs constitute the majority of the budget, and the purchasing contract costs for fiscal year 24 arise principally from, 1, that remaining portion of the marketing firm from the contract, and also from the pending purchase of a case management system for the compliance division, which I'll discuss further on slide 10. Slide 9 outlines some of the priorities for the Independent Procurement Review Division for fiscal year 24. First, as I noted, now that we have a full complement of independent procurement review officers, the division has the capacity to go beyond the mandatory reviews of procurements at the $1 million threshold. We intend to conduct discretionary reviews on those transactions that pose the greatest risk of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption. Alternative procurements, those including but not limited to emergency procurement and sole source, where there's less competition, fewer checks and controls, are a natural place to start. Indeed, review of emergency procurements are specifically contemplated in the charter. And with some of the legislation that is pending with the increased micro and small purchase limits for fiscal year 24, the division might also undertake a periodic review of those transactions. We're also looking to incorporate cost analyses into these discretionary reviews. The office has flagged instances this fiscal year where procurement amendments were presented to council that would have benefited from an independent review and a reporting of the then current contract spending level. With more accurate information, the council can more effectively determine if, when, and how to amend or extend existing procurements. In fiscal year 24, iPro also intends to issue quarterly reports that outline some of the trends from its reviews, flagging repeated issues and identifying potential causes of these issues. The goal is to be able to highlight them so that we can best address them. In this way, we hope to mitigate harm to the city. On reporting, we're also working to revamp the form of the current iPro report that we hope will better showcase areas the council might find would merit follow-up with user agencies and/or the Department of Procurement. We also intend to increase our stakeholder training. We meet with DOP, and we have met with select user agencies regarding the large projects, and iPro and compliance were included with the day of training for elected officials. But we hope to revisit these training opportunities so that we can make clear how the division functions, what's needed so that solicitation reports are provided to council alongside legislation, and also to identify those categories of findings that pose particular risks to the city. Finally, by the start of the fiscal year, we will have made revisions to our own internal review process. The independent procurement review acts as a check to ensure that city solicitations follow applicable rules and regulations, including the city's own protocols. So, to perform its function, IPRO must stay apprised of changes that impact the city procurement process, including processes governing the Department of Procurement, Enterprise Risk Management, Office of Contract Compliance, and user agencies. By and large, we've maintained the same system of testing that was first established when IPRO was created and housed within the City Auditor's Office. That system was based on the last formally issued standard operating procedures from the Department of Procurement, which are dated in 2014. A number of changes have been made informally to the city's processes since then. Understanding that the rules and processes will necessarily evolve, IPRO awaits new formal DOP standard operating procedures so that its own process can evolve in lockstep. For the Compliance Division, the #1 priority for fiscal year 24 is increasing our anti-corruption training. Where possible, we like to conduct these trainings in person because there's just no equal to the live interaction when discussing corruption hazards. But we'll also conduct the trainings via video conference as necessary. We tailor these trainings to each individual department, describing how our office came to be formed, highlighting the kinds of corruption hazards that arise in the particular kinds of work that those employees are working in their fields. These trainings, alongside with our policy and procedure recommendations, where we try to actively address corruption vulnerabilities that surface in connection with our investigations, establish the foundation of the prevention efforts for the office. With the training and the policy and procedure recommendations, and where possible, where there's advice and consultation with user agencies, the Compliance Division seeks to prevent losses to the city before they occur. In fiscal year 23, we provided anti-corruption trainings in 2 departments. For fiscal year 24, we want to dramatically increase our pace so that we're able to provide training not only to the city employees for the remaining city departments, but also to introduce corruption training and anti-corruption efforts within the city's vendor community. Another project that we've been working towards, and it will come to fruition in fiscal year 24, concerns our own internal governance within the Compliance Division. First, we will finalize our investigative manual, which will help guide the work of the division based on best practices with an eye towards nuances specific to City of Atlanta laws and government. The term case management on this slide here reflects actually 2 concepts. First, we're introducing Assistant Inspectors General as a new level of guidance and supervision within division so that we can better drive our case progress. With this move, we are formalizing a previously informal system where more senior and seasoned investigative staff have offered guidance to others in the division. But also within fiscal year 24, we will have initiated the use of our case management system. For an investigative office, a case management system is critical to the tracking of every element of investigations, from intake of a complaint through post-investigation dispositions, such as disciplinary actions taken, recommendations implemented, and fines issued. Without a case management system, tracking details of investigations is manual and rudimentary. For 2 years, we've been working to obtain the system, and we are finally at the finish line of procurement. And with regard to reporting, with a case management system, by this time next fiscal year, we will be able to provide a broader spectrum of and far more precise performance metrics. These will include things like average time to close cases, age of active cases, complaints received by method of intake, and external referrals of those complaints. Now, we regularly provide performance measures and information in our reports to our governing board, but those reports will be radically improved once our case management system is up and operational. Finally, and while it is a longer-term project, we will be starting the process with the goal of trying to amend the state's Open Records Act with regard to investigative case files of offices of Inspector General, not just ours, all for the state. We've had preliminary discussions with the Intergovernmental Affairs Director, and we hope to lay a strong foundation this fiscal year towards a change. Before concluding, I just want to thank the staff of the Office of the Inspector General. It's not easy to start a new office and introduce new functions to the city, and they have borne a lot and accomplished a lot, notwithstanding the challenging startup nature of the office. And I'd also like to thank the administration and the council for your continued support. As I noted earlier this year, for an office like this, that support is not ever taken for granted. So thank you very much. With that, we are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you for the presentation. I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Mr. Shook, and then Councilmember Overstreet.
So your budget's a different animal in that there's not a lot of historical data. You know, we can't compare this year's budget to 4 years ago and head count. And then plus, y'all are still a work in progress, and, you know, a lot of changes made earlier this year, and, you know, you're still sort of fine-tuning. I appreciate your kind of words about iPro and the role they play and some of the issues that come up sort of systemically around here. I mean, you've been here long enough to know that it's not unusual for departments or functions to not talk all that timely with one another, so they don't feel picked on. But who do you consider first among equals in terms of making this process work better?
So we work hand in hand with the Department of Procurement. I mean, that has been from day one. And we have appreciated very much the level of responsiveness that we've received from both the current CPO and the former CPO. The former CPO routinely spoke about the partnership that we have and how very much the Department of Procurement's own process had benefited from various issues that the iPro team had identified. So, you know, I think necessarily the Department of Procurement act as shepherds of the process, but user agencies play a significant role too. There are instances where some of those examples of things that happened at the last minute, some of those instances were ones where the user agency had also not informed the Department of Procurement. So the individual independent procurement review officer and the contract specialist at DOP were both throwing up their hands when suddenly an item appears on the legislative agenda that no one had identified. So it's for the kind of behind the scenes portion of it, absolutely everyone, it's iPro, it's Department of Procurement, it's the user agencies. And then from your end, there's just hoping that the council is able to have both the time and the opportunity of time, because that's why we try to get the reports ahead of time so that there can be review, so that there can actually be consideration of the matters that we put at hand. There have been a few instances over the last several months where there were items that we included in an iPro report that we were sure would merit quite a bit of questioning because we thought that they really should have garnered that questioning, and it received none. So some of it is also making sure that when we've identified these issues, for us to probably do a better job of, that's why I talked a little bit about us reforming the report, because it means nothing if we're able to flag issues, but then there's no follow-up. So doing a better job of really shining a light where we think that there might be problems.
Yeah, and so point well taken, that's on us. I'll just say I mean, you've kind of mentioned sometimes that things get telescoped in terms of the time, and we get caught up in that too. If something arrives at the last minute, well, then we might miss it. I'll say one thing that I'm very pleased about council's behavior. We have yet to send something forward on condition of receiving an iPro report on the council floor.
It's been a while since that happened, yes.
Well, it's never happened.
So it did. It happened, it wasn't this session, it was last. And it was actually, it happened a few times in a row. such that then it prompted kind of an email talking about that very phenomenon, what it means to kind of pass something out of committee on condition that the report will be received in time for the full council hearing, and that there was then not
Okay, I remember one time, I remember the circumstances, there were some unusual circumstances related to the one I'm remembering. I'm going to have to go back and look to see what the other ones were. Glad to see you get the staff and resources to move beyond the $1 million, items. I have some potentially overripe views about giving up some of our oversight, as we recently did, in my view, the other day. And so I would invite you to take a look at those areas. I think in the past, had you been around, that would have provided some interesting findings. But thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
All right. Other Councilmember Overstreet.
Thank you. I first want to say that I'm an iPro fan. Very proud of that, the way we've implemented that in the city and how it's working. So just know that. And so I kind of remember what he's talking about. And what I remember is that last session, my first term, we were taking for granted that, okay, we don't have to attach the iPro right now. And then Councilmember Juan came on and said, hold up. I think that we should not send anything forward unless we have it attached or something similar to that. I don't remember it being like a case of us not, like missing the ball on a Monday when we were supposed to have it and we didn't. But at any rate, I am a fan. I think that it is doing just what we thought it would do. And I love the fact that it's nothing left up for interpretation. Like, it is just what it is. It's data-driven. It's perfect for what we need it for, and I appreciate that. I know that you weren't 100% satisfied with where we landed with the changing of the pyramid, so to speak, or the structure of government, where we had an opportunity to actually change a few things that were the way you handle things in your office, and we didn't. But we did change some important matters, and I appreciate the way that you've adjusted with everything, because we are in this together, and we do have opportunities as certain situations arise. We do have opportunities to correct those things or to change the way we're doing it. We're going to continue to assess our conditions, make sure that we are doing things as needed for the city. And boy, oh boy, I can't tell you how I feel more confident today about pinpointing and rooting out the fraud and the waste and the corruption than I did when we first got on council. So we've come a long, long, long way. You also being innovative and forward-thinking about some of the other things that you guys are working on that we probably didn't even think about when we were developing your department, like training and just making sure that everyone was always thinking about exactly what's needed at that moment. And I appreciate that too. Like, that's what the role that you're in calls for, and your whole team. And so I'm here just to support and make sure that you have everything that you need to continue doing the great job that y'all are doing. And if you see that that's not the case, I would hope that we would use budget sessions like this for you to bring that to our attention like you did last year. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Winston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you all for being here today. I think this is such an important office, especially given, a city government with 8,000 plus employees. It's important for us to exude confidence, transparency, and being very ethical as we continue to operate our city government. I did have one question around your budget. I'm looking at other departments with similar operating budgets, and you have capital outlays outlined in your budget. Most other departments don't. I just wanted to know if you can explain some of the capital expenditures that you see coming out of your office. And I'm on page 455 in the budget book.
So some of that is distribution based on what I think we've done historically. When we had put money, I think as we're thinking about our case management system, I'm not sure if that is what's being characterized as a capital outlay. It is, without question, something that is fundamental structurally for the office. Our rough estimate for that is ballpark $60,000, so that makes sense if that's the space for it. But otherwise, no, I don't tend to think of us as having any real capital costs there, just the case management system.
Okay, so case management software,
Yeah.
system operating costs around that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted clarity because I wasn't seeing that in other departments with similar budgets. So.
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? All right, a couple of questions. First off, on page 6, you had mentioned, this is the budget trend, you mentioned that there will be an amendment coming forward to kind of right size. Is that finance? I want to make sure that that's on your radar as well in terms of budget amendments.
Yes, that will be included with aviation and watersheds
Okay.
amendment that they'll do more broadly.
All right, thank you. As we're tracking amendments, Ms. Linda, let's just make sure we have that one on our. So page 9, you talked about some of the things that you want to do in 2024, and one of the things that caught my ear, and I'm really excited to hear, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into, you talked about amendments to contracts, existing contracts that we've been talking about that in finance exec quite a bit, or other committees, where all of a sudden the amendments make the contract itself almost a completely different animal than what it started off as. I don't know if that's what you're getting at in terms of opportunities to take a closer look at the amendments, and I don't know also if it's kind of in the gestation period when the new user groups or the new scope is coming online, or if it's after the fact. Can you walk me through what you're thinking? Because I'm really intrigued by this.
Sure. And the short of it is, from our point of view, as we consider the categories that will fall into our discretionary review, nothing's off the table.
Okay.
So we have the same kind of reaction when it's Amendment 9 to a contract and you look at the original cost. So that would be included. But also to be included, there are some times where there have been matters that have been presented to council where it's just the First Amendment, but we have information that indicates that the money hadn't been spent entirely with the original contract, that they're asking for some expansion and they're only a fraction of the way in, and that none of that comes out in any of the back and forth, and it's not clear if that's brought to your attention, but it's the kind of thing that I would think would merit some follow-up if that information had been presented to you.
This is great. It really excites me to hear that y'all this has caught your eye as well, because I do think that could be a way of kind of changing the game a little bit, unintentionally or intentionally. But if we're looking at a fair and transparent procurement process, then there will be instances where that is legit, but that's also potentially opportunities for, like you said, some actions that may not be completely in keeping with our mission. Also, I was intrigued to hear that you talked about the Department of Procurement's SOPs hadn't really been refreshed since 2014, and
Not formally, right?
okay,
So
not formally,
there's-
right.
Yeah.
But I think that's, especially given all the progress that department has made under its new leadership, I'm excited to see that as well. And I appreciated your comments about how that's really the department y'all work really in lockstep with, because of the nature of your activity and obviously theirs as well. So is there a timeline on that, or is that just kind of something that you've talked to the Chief Procurement Officer about for the next 12 months?
There, and I don't think I'm sharing any secrets, there's an active guide that they have right now that I think is going to form the basis for the SOPs. I know from the Chief Procurement Officer that he was aiming for earlier this spring, but it is a very significant endeavor, and so I think it's just taking a little bit longer than anticipated.
Well, I look forward to, we'll definitely ask him about it when he comes and presents budget. I think that's a great thing. I think now that some of the things have been tightened and improved, now's the time to kind of capture that and formalize it. So I appreciate your raising that issue as well. The last thing I'll say is, well, two things. One is, I'll tell you the iPro report, I kind of really look forward to those because you just never know what you're going to, what will be in there. But it's always evident to me when I start looking at your findings in the comments that your team is doing a very thorough job. And again, even when you point out something, but you've determined that it's not a significant factor, I think is a good exercise for both us as well as the user departments and procurement, because it's kind of, okay, just, it's a learning opportunity, right? So I wanted to, it's kind of a fun thing whenever those start coming in. The final thing I will say is echoing what Councilmember Overstreet said, that I hope you understand, and if we didn't communicate it to you strongly enough during the process earlier this year, this is an evolution process. And I think we'll have opportunities and windows to open up kind of improvements and changes as you evolve and your team learns as well, much like you're restructuring some stuff. Part of it may be in response to the actions we took earlier, but part of it may be just a learning on your part as the plane keeps gaining altitude. But just know that, I'm always open to it. I think as we learn more, as you learn more, we'll keep having those opportunities to make those adjustments going forward, because much like in the conversation we had in the previous two presentations, the functionality of audit, ethics, and the Inspector General are too important for a city of our size, budget of our size, activity of our size, to not have these just oversight and investigatory activity, functionality, and we lean on y'all to do it. And so I just wanted to let you know that we're always open, and then just to also thank you and your team, because it helps create public trust and assurance that we desperately have to have. So.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Other questions or comments for the department? Again, the last thing I did want to point out, I had a conversation with Dr. Wilson. A couple of these budget presentations are a little funky this year because of the things that Shook mentioned, changes in restructuring. They're going to try and craft an appendix or an addendum that does a little more apples to apples based on the new structure going forward. So we'll have that going forward. Is that fair? Okay. So that we can have kind of a good side-by-side comparison of budgets based on that analysis. All right, if there's nothing else, then we're going to stand adjourned until 1 o'clock. Lunch will be served at noon, and then we will have Invest Atlanta here at 1 o'clock. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.